So yesterday, of course, was Freedom Day, when the government lifted restrictions and then put a few more into place for the end of September. We'll come to that shortly. It was also a record-breaking day for daily migrant crossings across the Channel. 430 migrants made the journey. It was a new record for a single day. Pip Thompson has been following a small boat across the English Channel this morning as well. These are pictures this morning. That is Border Force approaching the vessel on a jet ski. Quite an unusual sight, that is, and then supporting them. Live pictures. There you go. There's two of them there. And they will escort them into, hopefully, a safe landing, and then they can be processed when they do eventually reach the mainland.
Well, let's talk to the Business Minister, Paul Scully. 430 migrants made that journey across the English Channel yesterday. What's going on?
Well, there's all these pull factors for people that are travelling around the world because of, for fear of their lives. They've escaped a war and conflict, but they're in a safe haven in France. It's a safe country. We want to make sure that we can actually work with the French to for them to settle, because people should be claiming asylum in the first safe port.
For the 430 that made it over yesterday, do we have any idea of how many didn't actually get that far and got turned back by the French before they got onto the Channel?
I can't give you that detail, I'm afraid. I don't know.
I think because a lot of our viewers this morning look at these pictures, and of course there's real concern for the human side of this and those people making this perilous journey. They're not doing it just because, they just fancy coming to the UK because it looks like a nice place. They're doing it because they're leaving, for many of them, war zones and all sorts of horrific circumstances. But there's real concern to the pressure this puts on us as a nation and the facilities that we have here, with these record numbers that just seem to be set to increasing.
That's very true, but of course they're not leaving a conflict zone and coming straight here. They're coming via France and other countries, so they're coming into safe countries where there is no conflict, and so that's where they should be claiming asylum.
Right, well, let's put that to one side. We can see those live pictures from the English Channel, and we know that it is an ongoing issue. There is another issue that is at the forefront of people's minds this morning, of course, and that is the fact that you have reintroduced the idea of vaccine passports. Now, back in July, Michael Gove had considered this issue and said the government has concluded it will not mandate the use of COVID status certification as a condition of entry for visitors.
When you said back in July, that's this July where we are still, isn't it? So it was only this month.
Back in July.
We're still in July.
You're absolutely right. Time is passing at a weird rate when even within a couple of weeks you have U-turn. But of course, we've seen U-turns happen within 2.5 hours over the past couple of days. Nightclubs say this is discriminatory, and pubs and other crowded venues worried it's coming their way. Why didn't you introduce this immediately?
I think there's two reasons. First of all, the government said they wouldn't rule anything out, and that we reserve the right to introduce measures that would keep cases at a low level, and importantly hospitalisations, so we don't overwhelm the NHS over the winter. But there's two reasons why it's September. First of all, we need to make sure that we get the detail right, so that people can use it properly in terms of the venue operators themselves. But secondly as well, although 85% of adults have had their first dose of the vaccination, it gives us a chance to get more vaccinations into, and by that stage, every adult over the age of 18 would have had a chance to have that vaccination.
Why didn't you keep the nightclubs closed until you introduce this? Because if you think that they're going to be super spreaders, then they're going to be super spreaders until the end of September, aren't they?
It's a real challenge. It's a really difficult decision. I'm the hospitality sector minister, and so I speak to nightclub operators, and I've seen the desperation, the difficulty that they've had over the last few months. This is a very fine line between making sure that we can keep people safe, but also protecting people's jobs and their livelihoods as well. That's why these decisions are so difficult.
Mr. Scully, other restrictions that you're lifting might affect people, but most, 2/3 of adults are now double jabbed. But of course, that doesn't apply to many of those people who are using nightclubs. So not only are you opening nightclubs up, but you're opening them up to people who don't currently have the vaccination. It's almost a double whammy.
Well, we're also encouraging operators of various venues to use the certification voluntarily as well, and a number are taking that up, especially big ticketed events, some sporting events over the summer. You'll see using certification, but as I say, it's a really fine line for us to be treading to give people their freedoms back, making sure we can open the economy, but do it safely.
So I thought it was indoor crowded venues, like a nightclub specifically, but you're saying actually sporting events, so outdoor venues as well, may be facing people going to sporting events. Can you give us some ideas? Because I think the football season will start in a couple of weeks. So you're talking about Premier League football, you're talking about Football League?
I think a number of sporting venues are looking at doing it voluntarily. So it's not something we're mandating at this time. But it's, as I say, a number of venue operators are looking at how they might do it voluntarily at the moment, and they're exploring that.
And what about pubs? Can you put sort of pub owners' minds at rest? Are pubs crowded venues? I've been to plenty of pubs that have been. I mean, certainly the COVID restrictions have reduced the numbers, but they all got lifted yesterday, apparently. As a crowded pub, is that going to be somewhere where you're going to have to be double jabbed to go in?
Well, Ben, we're not ruling anything out, but it's important. That shows the complexity and why we've got to work through this, because actually you get some big pubs may have more people in it than some of the smaller nightclubs, and so it's very difficult to distinguish how crowds are moving between certain types of venues. So that's the detail that we've got to work through with operators, speaking to them over the next couple of months to make sure that we can get this absolutely right.
Not ruling anything out. If I was a pub owner, I would assume that means it's on the cards.
Well, look, no. I think what we're trying to do is, first of all, make sure people can get vaccinated, make sure that people can make informed decisions, make sure that people can remember that we're actually still living with COVID. Yesterday was a really pivotal moment for the economy, for people's freedoms as well. But this isn't like a film that you kill the COVID baddie and the end, roll credits. We're still learning to live with COVID, and we're going to have that for some time to come.
You are a business minister, of course, so you know only too well how important and how difficult it's been for businesses, big business and small businesses. And we're in the middle of what's been dubbed as a pingdemic, the controversial NHS Test and Trace app, and the numbers of people that are having to isolate because they've been pinged. Iceland, the supermarket chain, had to close some of its stores. We've had Green King pubs having to close some of its stores. Do you acknowledge that there is an issue with the app at the moment and the huge swathes of people that are being pinged because they've come into contact somebody, even if they aren't showing any signs of having COVID, and even if they negatively test, can't go back to work, and that's having a really, really difficult impact on business?
Well, I think what we're finding is that people now, they're actually going back to some semblance of normal with the freedoms restored. They're actually mingling with people more, and obviously cases are going up, so they're more likely to get pinged in the first place. So the app is actually doing its job, but it's important that we remember the legal position, which is that if you are contacted by NHS Test and Trace or you're seeking isolation payments, you're legally required to isolate. The app is there to allow you to make informed decisions.
So, yes, because the app is advisory, but if you're contacted directly by Test and Trace, then you are obliged to isolate. Do you acknowledge that the Prime Minister and the Chancellor's decision over the weekend not to isolate initially did damage people's compliance with isolation?
Well, it's important that we get clear messaging, and it's so difficult to do this in this age of 24-hour news cycles.
Yeah, they got it wrong, didn't they?
Social media. The Prime Minister's taken the right decision to self-isolate. I just come out of self-isolation last Friday because someone in my household had a positive test, and so I know how frustrating it is for people that are looking at this and seeing trying to work out what's best for them and their families.
You said, if this happened last week, weren't you part of the pilot?
No, I wasn't. And I isolated, I worked from home.
What did you think, Mr. Scully, when you saw that announcement on Sunday saying that they'd been pinged, but both the Chancellor and the Prime Minister were going to be taking part of a pilot and they would be able to carry on working?
Well, look, I mean, frankly, I wasn't watching the rolling news at the time. I was out enjoying my freedoms. But nonetheless,
You're a business minister, and you weren't across what the Prime Minister and the Chancellor...
What, on a Sunday? No, on a Sunday morning, Ben. Yeah. On a Sunday morning, Ben, when I was, when I was out in the Isle of Wight, actually, at someone's wedding. But the point is, I know the frustrations. I know the frustrations that the hospitality sector, in particular, are going. You talked about Green King pubs having to close, and there's a number of businesses having to do that. The app itself, as we estimate, has saved something like 8,000 lives because of the ability to take people off the streets from mingling because they've been in close contact with something. So it is doing its job, but nonetheless, we're in this really frustrating period as we learn to live with COVID.
And a lot of critical workers now being allowed to potentially circumnavigate what the rules are. We know that the NHS, some of the NHS workers were also being told that because there's real problems with staffing in the NHS, that actually if they can take a negative test, they can prove negative, they can go back to work. You've increased that list of people, energy workers, some people in the food industry, some transport workers as well. The tricky thing there is, depending on your job, doesn't necessarily change how infectious you might be with COVID, does it?
No, but you'll know that we're moving towards, for people that are double vaccinated in August, we're moving towards a position when they will be able to use a testing regime rather than having to have that blunt tool of isolation.
Would you like that to come forward?
Well, I think we've got to make sure we get it right and get more people vaccinated first, and that's the drive. But I mean, I'm the Minister for London as well. The Metropolitan line in London had to close recently because a handful of people, but really critical people, had to isolate, and that just took the whole line down. And so that's why we've introduced this for critical infrastructure workers as well as the NHS.
All right, Paul Scully, Business Minister, thanks very much indeed.